Yeah, my name is Bret Bronson. I started working at Benson's Animal Park May 19th, 1980, originally in the capacity of working with hoof stock and primates here. And July 2nd, I was diverted to the elephant building as a 2-week temporary position that turned into a full-time career. The building behind me is the original elephant building to Benson's that was built probably in the late 1800s. Literally, it was a barn. It was converted into housing a variety of animals, from elephants and primates to tigers, and evolved into a lot of housing aspects for animals and big cats. Camels lived here, primates. It was even a reptile facility, part of it, for the last few years the park was open. The elephants that I worked with, when I first came, there were only 2 elephants on the property. They were both Asian elephants, Queen and Liz. Literally, I came through the gates one morning to do my regular job, July 2nd, I'll never forget, and my boss asked me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to work," and he told me, he says, "Well, you're working with the elephants today." And I was a little frustrated because out of the whole zoo, the elephants were the only thing I knew nothing about. And he jokingly said, "Today you get to learn." Unfortunately, that day the assistant to the trainer had been fired. They needed some help. So I came over here to work with them, and it was supposed to be a 2-week position until they found my replacement. But as I joked, that two-week temporary position evolved into a 20-year career. But I started here with Queen and Liz under another trainer, learning how to care for them in parades. We did rides and shows at the park. We took the elephants down every day around 2 o'clock for a swim at what is called Swan Lake for the public. And later that summer, Jackie, an African elephant, was purchased late August and brought to the park. She was completely untrained, probably about 4 years old. I believe she was 54 inches tall when she arrived. So we had to do a little bit of the training while the public was here, which makes it a little bit more challenging, but she evolved and did really well. The following year, she became part of the performance. And over years, she just evolved into, all she had to do is show herself off on a daily basis and basically do rides and play in the lake. Queen and Liz did 2 performances every day, as well as they took turns providing elephant rides for the public here too. What does it make me feel to see it today? A lot of things. It's kind of bittersweet on one hand. On the other hand, it is absolutely stunning, fascinating, and awesome to see where it is today. Of course, anybody from my era has a sentimentality. We'd like to see it open the way it was before, but it's incredible when I walk around to see where it is. I worked here right up until the day the park closed in 1987. And I stayed here for the following 6 months, taking care of the remaining animals that hadn't been auctioned off yet until they could get placed. Federal paperwork, etc., had to be taken care of. And then I stayed here for 8 more years on my own with elephants I had of my own. At one point, I had up to 6 in this building that I rehabilitated, took care of, and trained and such. But we were here to watch this place slowly degrade, disintegrate, and fall to every summer especially was very strange. The winter months were odd, but in the spring and summer, when we were so used to seeing the park full of people, hearing the music and sounds, the kids running around and playing, and then to hear it with nothing and just watching the grass grow waist high, buildings starting to decay, get vandalized. Every year, we just watched the trees and grass grow taller and the buildings kind of shrink a little lower. Some would fall down, rot, decay, etc. But that was probably harder to see. This is odd to see, but it's wonderful to see where it is today and people enjoying it for what it is. And to have a museum here, I think, is absolutely fascinating, and I look forward to seeing it, what it evolves into myself. What's it like to work with elephants? In one simple answer. All the go-to words are fascinating, a privilege, all of that. It was even at the time. Queen and Liz were the first elephants I had ever worked with. So I became spoiled by them because they were initially incredibly well trained, very, generally speaking, very well-mannered animals. A lot of that was due to their very specific training by the original trainer, Slivers Madison. Not only did they know a lot, but they were just well-mannered animals. And I got to learn a lot. They were kind of my preschool in the elephant world. So there was not a day that something fascinating didn't happen with them. That went on my entire career as far as I'm concerned. I can't think of a day of working with elephants that they didn't do something to make me go, huh. And Queen and Liz were no different. They have very specific personalities, no different. As I used to joke with the public, if you line up 50 elephants and 50 people, you have a minimum of 101 personalities. Somebody in the crowd's got two. They're very different in personalities. Queen and Liz, were just very good animals. Liz, the best I could describe her would be like having the equivalent of a 4-ton Shep. She was just like a big dog. She was very well-mannered and loved attention. I used to joke once in a while when I'd be talking to somebody about the animals or whatever, she would just sneak up behind me and they'd get intimidated and I'd pretend I didn't know she was there, mostly to show off. But also she'd come up, and elephants love to have their tongue petted, many of them do. They have this very large bulbous tongue. And she would come up behind me and just start sticking this great big giant tongue out behind over my shoulder and licking my shoulder, and I'd intentionally ignore her so she'd do it even more so until you started to pet her. And then she would just rumble and purr, and she was very contented with that. Queen was an incredibly smart elephant. She was, I guess the best way to put it, had much more of a sassy side to her. She loved to get into trouble, break things. A little bit more headstrong, but she still was a very sweet elephant. And there was many times when nobody was looking, I would take Queen on her own and I would get up on her shoulders and I would ride her down to the back grounds of the zoo here, what we call the lumberyard. There's a big sand area and woods and such. I'd ride her down there. Once I got there, I would just stop talking to her and let her do her own thing for an hour or so. And just, I swear half the time she didn't even realize I was up there, but she would just walk around, just meander around, tearing up trees, and until she started throwing mud and dirt at my way, I'd been pretty silent. But they were very, very personable. Again, we received Jackie middle of August of '80, and when she came here, of course, she was completely untrained, pretty wild, and had quite an attitude. But she evolved out quite well. Africans and Asians are subtly different in character. I guess the best way I've always been able to compare elephants, African and Asian elephants, with the public is Asians are very much more similar to sort of a domestic cow of sorts, and Africans are a little bit more similar to a horse. They're just a little bit more high-strung and active. Other than that, they're equally as intelligent, equally as trainable. And Jackie was no different. She was just a youngster and very smart. And again, we used to, any chance we had when the public wasn't around, we would sneak them off down to the lake or down to the lumberyard and spend a few hours, what I call playing elephant hooky, and just let them play around in the mud, the trees, and sand pits down there, and just romper-room time. Well, we tried to schedule pretty much every day to bring them down here. I think it's like usually 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was quite a spectacle. You didn't really see something like that often back then. You probably never will today. But we used to walk them down the main boulevard, down to the very far corner over there, because it was a shallower point, almost like a beach, if you will, that they could approach into, as well as we could kind of keep an eye on the public, because people could crowd right around us. And the elephants got pretty rowdy in the water at times. But you know, we would just have them there, and people, you know, the upside, it was like a corner angle shaped area, and folks had a great vantage. There was no bad viewing point. And you could just watch them. They go in there and romp around and play. Oh, I would say an average of at least 20 minutes to a half hour. Bathe and, you know, push each other around, just have a grand old time. And it was something you just really don't get to see. You can go to zoos and see it today, but you always from a much greater distance. Here, you were within 30 feet of watching them do it. And then we'd bring them back out and do a couple little behaviors with them, and then walk them right up through the crowd back up the hill. And again, up these main roads is just something you don't see anymore. People would be kind of bug-eyed. You could reach right out and almost touch the elephants as they're walking by you. That alone is quite an experience. We used to play games with people once in a while because elephants are incredibly stealth-like. They basically walk on their toes and have a padding, so depending on how cocky we were that day, we'd be walking down the hill with 3 or 4 elephants, and I'd walk up and tap somebody on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me," and they'd look around horrified what's behind them, but they had no idea we were coming. So days like that were kind of fun too. But I'm sure it's things like that. Also, the public probably have told that story at least as many thousands of times as I have too. So it's something they could always bring home. And you know, all aspects of this park were fascinating with the collection of animals. The number we had here at the time, it was the largest owned and privately owned animal park in the country. Always had an incredible collection of animals, not just in number, but even in specific species of animals that were here. And the elephants were a huge highlight, of course, and you get to see them really up close. But I always like to emphasize, I was kind of spoiled and privileged. I got to work with the elephants, so everybody kind of knew who I was. But everybody that worked here was an integral part of this place. And I, in my many years of experience, have never met anybody that worked here even for a week in the ice cream stand that didn't consider this one of the most memorable parts of their lifetime. I knew of many, many incredibly dedicated zoo staff especially that worked here taking care of the animals. I mean, we were not paid well. Our gift was not in our compensation. It's just when people walked through that gate, we all loved what we did. And we had a running joke when we got together, even after work at parties or something. Okay, tonight we're not going to talk about work. We always would agree with that. We always failed miserably at not doing that. But inevitably you just had to talk about it. But it was just everybody that was here. Again, I was privileged or spoiled because I worked with the elephants, but my passion was no different than anybody else that worked with anything else here, birds, primates, hoofed animals, anything like that. If you wanted to work with animals, learn anything and everything you can, anywhere you can. All experience is valuable. I grew up on a zoo, but I'd never touched an elephant until I worked here. So I had that advantage to a point, but I knew nothing about elephants other than they're elephants. That was the extent of my knowledge. I've had many people over the years come to work for me that I've hired, and my critique I really wasn't so much interested in how many years of experience they might have had with zoo animals so much as their passion. To me, I'm a huge believer if you have a passion in anything, you're going to do well at it. Passion and interest. I've had people that have worked around animals for a year or two, and you know, we're a little cocky and puffed up with an ego, and that really discouraged me because you're just not going to learn and function properly based upon an ego. I've had people work with me around animals, especially even elephants, that knew absolutely nothing of what they were doing, but they were passionate in learning. And they're some of the best people I've ever worked with in my life, not just elephants, but animals in general, even at other facilities I've been to. So I would just say learn anything, anywhere you can. And I used to tell people all the time, don't do yourself a disservice by making yourself specific to one area. Learn everything you can. I have never met a zoo person, including myself, that ended up doing what they originally wanted to do. I had no clue I wanted to work with elephants until I was thrown into it one day. You just never know. And everybody I've ever hired, I can think of many times, they would want to work with a specific group of animals, and everyone I can think of flourished there, but they usually ended up specializing elsewhere of interest. And secondly, I've always told folks, keep all your doors open. Learn anything and everything you can, even about animals or things to do with it and how to care for them and build enclosures. Everything you can is important. My favorite memory or part, wow. That's an hour-long session all by itself. I would just have to simply put it, obviously the elephants, for me, were a huge part of my life and became more so as I evolved elsewhere. But I would say the uniqueness of this place, same thing. I've been asked the question many times, why is it people have so much passion for that park that worked here 30-something years ago? I don't have the wisdom to answer that one. But I don't think I have any more passion for the place than, again, I would say of the kid that worked in a food stand that summer. There's just something about the aura of this park at the time when it was open. It instantly, for lack of better terms, melded everybody into a family. You know, I don't know, avatared everybody, I guess maybe is the way to put it. And again, not to sound corny, but anybody that worked here had an importance. The place just wouldn't function properly without any one person. I don't know if I could put it into a memory, but the memories of the place, the memories of other people I've met here that have become lifelong friends. I've met patrons here that have become friends. I've met other people that have come here that I'm still friends with today that are still in the animal business. And, you know, the little privilege of being here today, 30-something years after the park closed, is a pretty unique aspect of it too. What the Friends of Benson's are doing with the elephant barn and renovating is just nothing short of spectacular. When I left here, because I resided here 8 years after the park closed with the elephants I had privately, and I, as I said earlier, watched the place just very, I don't want to say gradually, almost quickly deteriorate. Nature was starting to take it all back over. I came back here years later. I heard talk they were going to bulldoze the elephant barn, a few other buildings, and I'll admit it made me kind of misty-eyed because that was home to me. I literally spent more hours in that building than I did my own home. Of course, that building holds a great deep realm of sentimentality for me that it would for a lot of other people, but to see what they've done there is just absolutely spectacular. The animals I got to take care of in that building, and I literally bled, sweat, and shed tears in that building, so to see it preserved really means a lot to me. But I'm a huge advocate of history. I don't care who it is or where it is. History to me is incredibly important. So to preserve that building and especially turn it into a museum for folks to learn about what this place used to be like and even how it's evolved in the last few years is incredibly important. To learn about the people that were here, the animals that were here, the uniqueness and the things that it served for the community, even the country. This was a world-renowned place in its heyday. All of that is incredibly important. And all I can stress to anybody is please come enjoy the place today. Please enjoy what I still call my elephant barn, but learn all the history you can about the place. You know, as far back as you go, right up to present, there's still fascinating things going on today. And I don't even know anybody, I believe, that has worked on that building. All I can say is thank you, and it's just spectacular what they've done.